Hi, online writing instructors. Welcome to week 5. This is the voice of Dr. Harris. I'm not showing you my face because I've been working all weekend and because I want you to focus on the text on your screen because I'm going to walk you through the week 5 revision. So if you feel really comfortable with the week 5 project, you probably don't have to watch this unless you're just sitting eating lunch and want to see what I'm saying. But for those of you who might have some questions still about week 5 or how to do this step in the revision, I'm going to walk you through some ideas, some tips, some tricks for revising your assignment. So first of all, we're working in 2 areas, navigational design and instructional design, and you read about both of those areas in week 4. But what I'm doing in week 5 is kind of practicing what I preach, modeling what those week 4 activities kind of look like in my week 5 class. And then we'll talk about some particular things you might do with a sample student assignment. So course feedback is optional, read that. I'm not going to talk about it in this video. But the steps that we're going to do in this revision move us from what we were calling an assignment to what we are now calling a unit. So we started the class with kind of the outcome, what you want students to do. You want them to write an essay, you want them to write a summary, you want them to be able to do a specific task, compile a portfolio, what have you. Now we're going to expand that from just an assignment to a whole unit. So how do we build out the unit of a course that helps students get from their course objectives to the assessment and whatever the final project or what was originally your assignment? So before we talk about these steps or what I want you to do for week 5, I'm going to scroll down here and pop out this week 5 outcomes, activities, and assessments. Sorry, that should be just resources. Sorry, editing as I go. This is kind of a similar table to the one that I asked you to do in week 4. And this table is what you'll be doing in week 5. So this is my version for week 5 of what you did in week 4 and what you'll use to revise your assignment into a unit. So the first thing I would do in revising your assignment is just taking these outcomes that you created for this assignment and putting them directly into the top part of your revised unit or your revised assignment. So that is actually here. These are not necessarily in order. Write learning outcomes that are clearly stated at the end of the introduction to the unit. So put your learning outcomes in and then write your introduction to introduce those at the very beginning. You can strip out any elements that you have left over from that 1.3 draft assignment. Those were just kind of brainstorming categories. If they don't work for you, if there's nothing in them, take them out, take out the headings. Don't take out your learner profile at this point. We will be taking that out and then in the final version, but leave that up there so you know who your learners are so you can keep focused on who you're writing for. But that's the first step I do. Take your outcomes, copy them in. And what I've done in this table for you that you can access is as you're doing these activities, so these activities in this column are the same as these activities. I just kind of pulled them out so you'll have a list here of what to do. As you work through these activities, if you need a refresher, these are the resources that I linked into the introductory sections of this course design unit. So all of these readings I just pulled out for you and put them what I'm calling at the point of need. And I ask you to do that for students as well. So at the point of need would be when you're doing embedding hyperlinks to resources, the point of need is as you're embedding, you need to understand how to embed. So I'm copying and putting those in there so you understand them or you have access to them directly when you need them. So I'm going to talk about some of the rest of these elements that I want you to do using a copy of Janelle's assignment. First of all, because Janelle has done some of the things I'm already asking you to do, and partially because I need a text just to talk about what this would look like in practice. If you're walking through these in order, like I said, I would probably do writing learning outcomes first, even though that's down here under the communication section, although you don't necessarily have to do that. So including the why, that relates to motivation and attitude. I noticed in your revision for 3.1 that a lot of you did the what. And a lot of you did the how and the do, but some of you really skipped the why. Why are you doing this assignment? Why do students need to know how to do that? And what I'd like you to do with this particular revision is to address their intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. So in the learner profile that you did for week 3, you labeled what students' intrinsic and extrinsic motivations might be. Use that kind of description to go in and put in your introduction of your unit, in the introduction to your instructional materials, somewhere in the text, why students need to do this. And it might be because they need to know how to do this for this class. It might be that they need to know how to do this for their career. It could be that they need to know how to do this to move through college. It could be that they're doing a rhetorical analysis and it doesn't look like something that they're going to need, except think about this example of you arguing with a car salesman. You need to understand rhetoric to be able to do that effectively. Whatever you think will cue into their intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. So if I'm Janelle, what I'm going to do is, these are all her, that's her learner profile. In this introduction to this unit, at some point, I'm going to put in, you need to do this because X, Y, and Z. And she's done some of that here. If you'll look at this here, you'll be able to pick which pieces you want to include, blah, blah, blah. This is going to give you practice compiling samples, which you'll want to do for interviews after you graduate. So she's not only connecting this portfolio to the goal of getting work in the Writing Center, which is one of her goals, but it's also saying, you need to do these things as you go out into the workforce. We're helping you to practice submitting this portfolio for the class electronically, which gives you additional practice with technologies. These technologies are useful for group work collaboration. So she's really explaining here the why of why she's asking you to do this. She's not asking her students to do this just for busy work. She's asking them to do it because she's building particular skills that are going to help them in the Writing Center and in their jobs and classes once they get done working in the Writing Center. So that's the first element I'd like you to add. And one of the things that really motivates students, believe it or not, maybe you do because this motivates you, is just giving a list of deadlines. So at the beginning of the document, even though you're going to repeat them throughout because repetition is a best practice, create a list of deadlines. Here's an overview of when you're going to have these things done. So you've got the introduction, kind of the what and the why. She's got her learning outcomes in here already. At the end of this assignment, you should be able to. Here are her learning outcomes. I'm not going to comment on quality. I'm just showing kind of how this would look. And then if I were her right here, I would add a table and put in an overview of assignment deadlines. Just a simple reference of here's what you're going to need to do. Here's what the point at which you're going to have that done. That's really motivational. Being able to really easily see deadlines and outcomes. For the overall course, you might create a Google Doc with a giant table like I do for our schedule. But in each assignment, you might also put an individual table that talks about students' deadlines as well. So the next thing on the list, creating instructional materials that demonstrate coherence and use, there's a typo I'll fix, so straightforward language that clearly is directive when giving instructions and non-directive when giving students choices. We've practiced this a little bit and I've given you some comments both in the 1.3 assignment and the 3.1 assignment that talk to you about the idea of straightforward language. If you want to know more about that, if you kind of remember but you don't, it's somewhere in my readings, where is it? You can go in here and it's in chapter 12, Strategies for Writing Instructional Texts. This chapter is a gold mine. It's like the core of how you write to teach. It says writing to teach, and she is not kidding me. I think I said in the materials for presence and interaction, I still practice these things. I still struggle with these things. We can't practice these things enough. So when we talk about coherence and instructional text, right here on page 173 is what we're talking about. Look again over this if you haven't already, or you've taken notes here. So relying on 3 principles: repetition, information arrangement, explicit language. And then she talks about what each one of those are. And what I'd like you to focus on here are these examples she gives you. This is an instructional material. She's teaching her students how to proofread. I can't highlight that because it's an image. and she's writing out how to proofread. So if you're asking your students to write a summary, write out instructional text that teaches them how to write a summary. You can give examples, link to those, provide videos, whatever you need to do. But at some point in this revision, you'll have to actually say, this is what this element is. This is how you can do it. It doesn't necessarily need to be as elaborate as Hewitt's examples, but this gives you a good idea of writing instructional text. And that's what I'm talking about when I say create instructional materials that demonstrate coherence, look like Beth Hewitt's, use straightforward language that's directive when you're giving instructions. So if it's something they have to do, you're being directive, and non-directive when you're giving choices. If they can do one of three things, then the language can be a little less directive. And again, all of that is outlined in this chapter 12 text. This is absolutely, this organize the unit to include design elements is all about just the visual. You can go above and beyond this if you want, but this item is just the basic elements. Like this is what you absolutely just have to be able to help students scan a text and be able to see and finish steps. So organize the unit to include design elements, including boldface for emphasis. That's what I'm doing here. I actually, as I'm looking at this, don't like this. I think it's too much bold, and so it doesn't differentiate. So I think I'm probably going to go in and change that after this video is over. So if this video doesn't look like the final, that's because as I'm creating things, I'm seeing how users see them, and it's not what I like. Numbered lists when students complete steps in a process. So if you'll notice, every list that I have where you have to do one thing and then another is numbered. Any list that I have where you just have to do things, but they're not numbered. Numbered lists are for do this first, second, third. Bulleted lists are for do all these things, but not necessarily in this order. So making sure that you include numbered lists. Using appropriate headings to break up major sections. I'm going to go back to Janelle's assignment here because she's using some headings. Major headings for the big chunks, and then smaller headings for smaller chunks. And I'm going to actually point out something that we're going to come back to in the accessibility section. But if you look at when I clicked on assignment details, so this is a level 1 heading, what Janelle's done is created a style sheet that ties or creates her headings for her. And this is going to be important because with screen readers, people who have visual problems and use screen readers, the screen reader will pick up on first, second, third level headings, and it will help them to actually navigate the text. So she's using heading 1 here. Her heading 2 is here. And you can reset these just by going into the document and update heading 1 to match. So if you like, whoops, I actually just changed that to heading 2. Sorry. You can go in and make heading 1 whatever you want. I want heading 1 to be not italics, bold, and 18 point. And so I'm going to make all the heading 1s match that. And the nice thing about that is once you've created that style sheet, all of these automatically change. I'm going to make this heading 2. Yep. I'm going to make this heading 3. It's already heading 3. So just create those headings. So this is called scannability. I can see immediately, all right, I've already done part 1. I need to get to part 2. Where's part 2? I can scan the document and get right to part 2. I don't have to read through all that again to get to where I'm going. And finally, making chunky text that is easily scannable. And they talk about this in this, actually it's a weird resource, okay, but I really like how he gives examples in here. This is not good page design. Do not just ignore him there. But he does a really good job in here of talking about this kind of chunky text, the before and after examples. So here's kind of a before of just a big block of text. Here's an after of how you can use bolding and divide that up to really make your audience see exactly what they need to see. Here's a great example of how you pull numbered lists out of a big chunk of text. For a reef run, you must do this, do this. This is much easier to see than this. So use all these kinds of examples to do the design elements of your text. And if you don't have parts built out yet because you're still working through things, you can still put the headings in and then just add those in later. Embedding hyperlinks to resources at the point of need. So a lot of you have a bunch of resources that you found already, but you don't necessarily have those linked in where students need them. So if you want a student to learn how to do a summary, and you say, for example, see this summary, and you link to an example summary that's online or a Google Doc that's an example summary, make sure that embedded hyperlink is wherever you say they need to do X, Y, or Z. And the challenge I'd like you to do now is to find at least one video or audio example or resource to link in as well, so that they're not reading text all the time. Those of you taking multimedia will start designing your own, but for now we're not going to design them, we're just going to find them and link them in. We've already talked about writing learning outcomes, but that relates directly to this last point, which is at the end of your assignment. So the final assignment, you're building unit pieces all the way up to an essay or something that they have to do at the end that assesses how well they do their outcomes. So for this revision, I want you to write a rubric for the final that indicates how your students will be assessed. And this goes right back to that Dirksen text. If you read Dirksen chapter 3, she does a really brilliant job of talking about assessable outcomes. So make sure you go back and read that. So if you have a learning outcome on writing a clear topic sentence, you need to have an element of your rubric that assesses writing clear topic sentences. Conversely, if you already have a rubric that talks about how their topic sentence needs to be clearly written, and you don't have a learning outcome that talks about clearly written topic sentences, fix that. Create the outcome, put some instructional materials in there that talk about how to do it, and then align your rubric to that. Now, for some of you who've been teaching a while or who are coming in with an assignment that you use as part of a sequence, perhaps you've been working on grammar this entire time, and so you are just assessing things that they already should know. It's fine to do that and put that in your rubric at the end. Just put a little comment, a little note in that lets me know that you've already been working on this in the class, and so this should be part of something that they're already doing. But if they haven't been working on it throughout the class, it should be somewhere in the learning outcomes and in the instructional materials that you create. Once you're done, some of you did this in the last revision and some of you didn't, and it was very strange who did and didn't. I didn't see a pattern. But once you've completed this assignment, use Google Docs to tell me where you focused on each element. So I'm just going to say I'm Janelle, and here I do, I'm going to highlight this text. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say level 1 heading, environment. Actually, that's a level 2 heading. Just to tie it back into kind of those skills gaps, showing that you understand. Now that one's easy, but she'd also want to probably go in up here like we were talking about before. And, sorry, I'm skimming a lot. Here is adding in why, and that would be motivation and attitude. So annotate this so I can scan through this document and see, oh, they're picking up on X, they're picking up on Y. I can kind of get a read through at the very beginning of where you're doing particular things. So I can check and make sure that you're understanding in implementation the concepts that we're teaching. That's actually kind of that meta-analysis. I ask students to do that a lot. If you thought you revised for pronouns, highlight and tell me where you revised for pronouns. If they don't do that highlighting and explaining, I kind of assume they don't understand or don't know how to do it, or that they skipped that part of the assignment, which I think might also be something that happens. So that goes over these basic things we're going to do in week 5. If you have any questions, please let me know. I know this is a lot because it's an 8-week class. There's a lot of reading, there's a lot of revision, but at the end of the class you're going to have 1 unit of your course built already that you're going to be able to layer in materials from the multimedia class, or you're going to be able to use just on the ground teaching wherever you're at. So have a great evening. I look forward to seeing your revisions, and I will talk with you soon.